This video is about information processing and cognitive theory of learning and the learning theory of educational psychology. Research on human memory has helped learning theories to describe the process by which information is remembered or forgotten. This process usually referred to as the Atkinson-Shiffrin model of information processing. Before that, let's check it out what it means by information processing theory. Information processing theory is the cognitive theory of learning that describes the processing, storage, and retrieval knowledge in the mind. Here are the components of information processing theory that you need to know. The first one is sensory register, short-term or working memory, long-term memory, and there are others in processing model which are levels of processing theory and dual code theory. Now, let's get through the sequence in Atkinson-Shiffrin model. External stimulus from the sensory organ enter the sensory register. If the mind pay attention to it, it will be processed. If not, it will be forget out. Then, the stimulus will enter initial processing, in which it will go to working memory or short-term memory. After several rehearsals or repetitions, the information will be directed to long-term memory. If not, it will be forgotten. In sensory register, sensory information is received and held for no more than a couple of seconds. In order to hold the information longer, we need to pay more attention to it. Attention is a very limited resource. Thus, in order to gain attention from our students, we as teachers can use some strategies like cues, implementing gestures and body language, increase the emotional content of material, use surprising stimuli, and announce important information. Next, let's move to the other component of information processing theory, which is short-term or working memory. Short-term or working memory are the component of memory in which limited amounts of information can be stored for a few seconds, while long-term memory is the components of memory in which large amount of information can be stored for long periods of time. There are three types of long-term memory, which are episodic memory, semantic memory, and procedural memory. Research on brain has shown that brain is a pattern seeker in terms of connecting new information. Thus, teacher has to make learning understandable and make sense to students. As brain input information through the sense, learning environment has to be conducive and safe so students can learn efficiently. Mind can only pay attention only on one thing at a time. Thus, teacher has to train students to enhance their attentiveness. Brain also requires time to process information. Thus, it is recommended for students to take a minute to rest and reflection after a heavy seasons of learning. Next is forgetting and remembering, which contain interference and facilitation. Interference is what made us forget, and facilitation is what helped us to remember. Interference happens when the information mixed up or pushed aside by other information. Situation that causes forgetting is retroactive inhibition, where learning a new information makes a person forget what he learned previously, and proactive inhibition, where ability to learn new information decreases as a result by interference from existing knowledge. Facilitation is the opposite of interference. In proactive facilitation, ability to learn new things is increased by the presence of previously acquired information. Retroactive facilitation is an increasement in comprehension of previously learned information because of the acquisition of new information. There are some strategies that teachers can apply regarding forgetting and remembering. First, don't teach similar concepts too closely in time. Second, teach a concept truthfully before the next one is introduced. Third, use ongoing assessment and reteach if necessary. Fourth, teach important material at the beginning of the lesson and summarize at the end. Lastly, provide plenty of practice for your students.
So, let's move on to the practice. Practice is the most common method for committing information to memory, is also the most unexciting. Practice. Does practice make perfect? Practice is very important at several stages of learning. The capacity of the working memory also requires practice. The types of practice that you should know is masses and distributed practice, enactment, and generation. So, what kind of definition is behind this practice? The first one is mass practice. Mass practice is a technique in which facts or skills to be learned are repeated often over a concentrated period of time. While distributed practice is a technique in which items to be learned are repeated at intervals over a period of time. The third one, enactment. Enactment is a learning process in which individuals physically carry out tasks. And the last one is generation. Generation is creating something new from existing information. How can memory strategies be taught? Much of what students learn in school are facts that must be remembered. In many studies, psychologists have examined verbal learning. There are three types of verbal learning, which is pair associate learning, serial learning, and free record learning. Pair associate learning involves learning to respond with one member of a pair when given the other member, usually from a list of pairs to be memorized. In typical experiments, the pairs are arbitrary. Educational example of pair associate tasks including learning, the state capitals, names and dates, date of battles, the addition of and multiplication tables. In serial learning involve learning a list of terms in a particular order, memorization of the notes on the musical staff, the elements in atomic weight order, and poetry and songs are serial learning tasks. And the third one is free recall learning, which is involve memorizing a list but not in a spatial order. Recalling the names of the 50 states, type or reinforcement, kind of part it fit, and the organ system in the body are examples of free recall tasks. Imagery is simply the formation of any mental pictures. It has a great benefit when it comes to memory. By this, we can enhance the processing of information into memory system. For example, trying to remember a phone number by repeating it in your lip is a common method, but what might enhance your processing of the information might be to use imagery. Next, let's find out what is serial and free recall learning. Serial learning involves comprehending facts in a particular order, learning the events on a timeline, the order of operations in long division, or the relative hardness of mineral are examples of serial learning.
We move to rote versus meaningful learning. Rote learning refers to the memorizations of facts or associations such as the multiplication tables, the chemical symbols for the elements, words in foreign language, or the name of bones and muscles in the human body. In contrast, meaningful learning is not random, and it relates to information or concept learners already have, while innate knowledge is information with limited use that cannot apply in life. Remember that you need to know how and when to use the information you have. Now, we move to schema theory. Schema theory is information is stored in long-term memory using schemata. Structure and function of schemata are as network of connected facts and concepts, provide structure for assigning meaning, organized in hierarchies, information grouped under general categories. Meaningful learning requires active involvement and use of background knowledge. Here are some important of background knowledge that you should know.
How do metacognitive skills help students learn? The term metacognition means knowledge about one's own learning or about how to learn. Thinking skills and study skills are examples of metacognitive skills. Examples of learning strategies that use metacognitive skills are self-questioning strategies. Self-questioning strategies is learning strategies that call on students to ask themselves who, what, where, and how questions as they read material.
There are few study strategies that facilitate learning that you should learn. The first one is note-taking. Second, underlining. Third, summarizing. Fourth, writing to learn. Fifth, outlining and mapping. And the last one is the PQ for